I think it's fair to say that we are currently living in one of the most unusual markets ever. We've seen some of the largest companies in the world have their valuations cut in half. Crypto has gotten absolutely destroyed, and many people believe that we are right now in a recession. Bitcoin has fallen to prices that we haven't seen since 2020. And with many crypto experts believing that we are in a crypto winter, I think it's important to talk about how the crypto miners are affected and how they will shift moving forward. So in this video, we're going to talk about the fall of Bitcoin. Do I believe that we are in a crypto winter, and how Bitcoin prices are going to significantly affect not only CleanSpark, but all the Bitcoin miners in the coming quarters. But with all that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. So year to date, Bitcoin has fallen over 50%. And although this isn't unusual for crypto, there are a lot of fears that Bitcoin could remain at these prices or get extremely worse. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on Bitcoin pricing, but here are some things to consider. We have already seen that Bitcoin has moved similarly with the market when it comes to inflation. As the CPI report continued to post higher and higher inflation numbers, Bitcoin's price continued to fall lower and lower. And until we see inflation truly start to go down, I don't see Bitcoin really making a significant move to the upside. But there is another situation that we could see occur down the road. With high amounts of inflation, that puts a lot of pressure on the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates to lower demand so that they can try and shift inflation downward. But as we've seen in the prior interest rate hike, a 50 basis point increase did not have much of an effect on inflation. So this scenario that I'm about to give is not a likely scenario as of now, but I think it is something to keep in mind for the future. If we get to a point where we see high inflation, GDP fall, and high unemployment, we will be in a place called stagflation, and this would be the worst case scenario. The last time we were in stagflation was in the 1970s, when there was an oil shortage that sent gas prices soaring. Now, we are definitely showing signs of an oil shortage because of the things going on in Europe. But the main thing that we need to see is an extreme hike in unemployment. And our unemployment rates here in the US are still significantly low. Granted, we have seen companies start to cut jobs, so there's definitely a possibility for this number to increase. But I do not see this happening for at least another year or two, if inflation is not under control by then. But if this were to happen where the US experiences stagflation, there is a possibility that Bitcoin could be a place where people would want to park their money. If we continue to see the dollar lose extreme amounts of value due to the high inflation, and we see a shift in the world's reserve currency, this might lead to a wider adoption in Bitcoin, leading to higher prices. Now, I don't believe that this is going to happen anytime soon, but I do believe that down the road, we could see this happen. But those are just my thoughts on Bitcoin prices, and now let's talk about the crypto miners. There are three major things I believe we should talk about when it comes to the miners, and that would be margin, impairment expense, and revenues. So when we consider the margins for Bitcoin mining, they have changed substantially, because as Bitcoin prices moved up, the margin would move up as well. And as Bitcoin prices move down, well, you get the idea. So there are several companies that have been significantly impacted by these margin reductions because of the lack of wholly owned facilities, which basically means that the miners you have are in facilities that you already own, and high energy and operation costs. There are several companies that have pretty high costs to mine a Bitcoin. If we look at Hut 8, for example, during their most recent quarter, they averaged about $18,000 per Bitcoin. So with the prices where they are right now, this is not a great place to be for many of these miners. In order to improve operation costs, they would either need to own more facilities for themselves to reduce energy costs or change locations altogether. CleanSpark, on the other hand, has energy costs around $4,500, which is significantly low considering that the majority of their miners are in facilities that they already own. If we are in what many believe is a crypto winter, this may be a season where we see those with low margins either spend a lot of cash to improve their operation costs or retreat from this business altogether. But we'll just have to see how this all plays out. The second piece of the puzzle is their impairment expenses. Now, unless there is a way you can get around this, holding Bitcoin as it falls impacts your quarterly reports. At the end of the quarter, if your Bitcoin loses value, then it would need to be reported as a loss, even though you haven't sold. Now, personally, I don't like this rule, but it is what it is. Regardless, as long as this rule still applies, all Bitcoin mining companies must report their losses on the Bitcoin that they own. And after we've seen Bitcoin prices tank, if prices stay the same, many companies are not going to have good quarters when it comes to their net income. For those companies that hold on to almost all of their Bitcoin, we could see significant losses because the price from April 1st to now has been cut over half. Now, over the long term, it might not make a difference, but this could be some rough reports unless these companies improved massively on their margins and showed continued expansion. And this is where I want to go back to CleanSpark. There were several people that I know who disagreed with the management team selling Bitcoin in order to buy more miners. But I think it's fair to say that in the short term, it was probably the best move they could ever make, because not only were they able to sell at higher prices, but as other companies are worrying about lower margins and deploying more cash to solve this issue, CleanSpark is continuing to buy more miners so that they can improve their hash rate even more to become a top 5 miner in profits, revenue, and clean energy. Now, of course, not all Bitcoin miners are in a horrible position, so I do want to make that clear. But I do think that we are entering a season where these mining companies are probably going to face their most significant test so far. So I know that these losses will only affect this upcoming quarter, but what about a couple of years from now? This is honestly the most important question. The reality is that I don't know what is going to happen. We could be experiencing a crypto winter, or this might be a small setback in Bitcoin price, and we move up at the end of the year. As I said at the beginning of this video, I don't see Bitcoin prices moving substantially until we see inflation start to move down. Right now, Bitcoin is not an inflation hedge. That's just what we've seen in the markets. It is a place for many people to diversify their funds as a high risk, high reward play, and that is it. And until we see worldwide Bitcoin adoption, I don't see Bitcoin becoming an inflation hedge. But if we do experience high inflation throughout the end of the year, and we do go into a mid-tier recession, I do see a crypto winter on the horizon if it isn't already here. So how would a crypto winter affect these miners? Well, even though we may not see massive impairments unless Bitcoin prices fall significantly further, which is still a possibility, many of these companies will need to place their focus on profitability before expansion. Those who are currently struggling will need a substantial amount of cash and probably even sell some of their Bitcoin. For several mining companies, they have already diluted shareholders substantially, and with current share prices, they will probably not want to dilute again. So they could sell Bitcoin at lower prices than they wanted and spend a good amount of time working on improving margins, while the other companies that already have solid margins can continue to expand and grow their hash rates. And this is the major reason why I am extremely bullish on CleanSpark. They have continued to show that they are focused on profitable growth, and I believe that the payout will be seen over this next year. On June 16th, CleanSpark announced that they took over an existing purchase contract for 1,800 Antminer S19 XP units, and they entered into a partnership to grow their immersion cooling network. I'm confident that this company will be able to achieve their projections. The risk for this company is if Bitcoin falls substantially further, but at that point, all of the miners are in danger. The last thing to consider is revenues. No matter how much these Bitcoin mining companies improved their hash rate over this past quarter, we will more than likely see revenues lower in this upcoming earnings report. I could be wrong, but that is going to be my guess. For some of the larger companies that already had a higher hash rate, the comparisons to the previous year might be a little tough. But let's look at some of the numbers for CleanSpark. They had revenues this past quarter of $41.6 million, which is 4x what they did last year. Now, they did report a net loss, but with a company that can focus more on growth, I don't mind seeing a net loss, especially after they have proved already to be profitable. With a market cap right now under $200 million, the company currently has assets of $425 million. This means that the company is currently valued at half of their overall assets. For a company that has shown that they can be profitable and has more assets than their market cap, the current valuation doesn't make sense. The company also has liabilities at $23.9 million. So they have almost 18 times the amount of assets as they do liabilities. Now, of course, we may see the revenues decrease, but that is something to consider. Onto the balance sheet. The company currently has cash of $1.9 million, which for a company that has a market cap of $200 million, that doesn't sound good at all. But their digital currency, in other words, the amount of Bitcoin that they have, is at about $17 million. What I think is important though, is how they utilize this Bitcoin. Their CFO, Gary Vecchiarelli, said in an earnings call 2 quarters ago that as a miner, Bitcoin is our functional currency and how we get paid. Therefore, we think it makes sense to use Bitcoin to generate even more Bitcoin. Now, CleanSpark did get some financing at the end of April to add more miners to their fleet. So that will be something that I'll pay close attention to see if they continue to add debt. But as of now, I don't see this as a major issue. But here's something that I find interesting. Over the past month, we have actually seen CleanSpark hold more Bitcoin. I will be really interested to see how much Bitcoin they hold for the month of June. But either they were prepared for Bitcoin prices to fall, or they got extremely lucky. And honestly, I don't know. For now, CleanSpark is showing that the way they used Bitcoin may have been the best option. So we will see if if other companies begin to do this as well, or if CleanSpark will now start to shift into holding more Bitcoin given Bitcoin's fall. Now, as for me, I'm continuing to buy CleanSpark. I do recognize that revenues will probably be lower than the last couple of quarters, so it might not look good in the short term. However, I think that they are in a great position to continue to add miners to grow their hash rate and continue to generate solid margins given their low energy costs. Because I already have this position built out, it is not one that is a must buy for me each day, but I do like the risk reward given current share prices. But I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit that like button down below. That helps this channel in a massive way. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts about Bitcoin's price moving forward and if you're invested in Bitcoin miners. So feel free to mention them in the comments down below. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That way you are notified when new content comes out. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one.